Hey everybody, Barry Johns here. Welcome back to another edition of Studio Talk. If you've been watching my channel, you know I've been going through a transition period, migrating away from Avid HDX into the more native world. I'd simply, as a Pro Tools and Avid HDX/HD user for over the last 20 years, I simply got fed up with how poorly Avid treats its customers and gouges its customers for an insane amount of money that is simply not justified in that annual extortion fee they call support. What a joke that is. So before this, I'd been a Pro Tools HD/HDX user for the last 20 years, okay? And up until recently, I had an Avid Omni that I used with it, as well as an Apogee AD16 and 16X. So that's what I had as far as hardware I/O in my studio. And I've also used a 24-channel D command control surface with it for a very long time. But since it only works with HD/HDX, as I'm migrating away from Pro Tools, that no longer is viable for me. So I had to do some reconfiguration. So I went through my journey of trying out various DAWs. So as the core of my studio, I decided to go with the RME Fireface UFX Plus. Okay, it has 12 ins and 8 out on it, and is full featured. It has MADI built into it. It has up to 16 channels of ADAT I/O on it. Has a lot of flexibility and everything. Has Thunderbolt 2 as well as USB 3. Okay, so it's a very, very, very powerful unit with a very, very rock solid company and stable drivers. So then I needed to add additional I/O for all of my various hardware pieces in here so that I'm not patching like crazy with my patch bay. If you're curious about how to wire a patch bay, I've got a video out there on how I wired my patch bay initially that really talks about the concept behind it. And so if you want to understand patch bays, go back and watch those videos. So anyway, I finally selected the Ferrofish Pulse 16 to add an additional 16 channels of analog I/O. So I did a brief overview about talking about how I was going to have to rewire everything and figure out the number of cables that I'm going to need to replace, because as an example, everything before was DB25 to DB25. Now there's no DB25 connectors on the back of the either the Pulse or the Fireface, which I think is a huge miss on both of those. But the reality is most of mine were either DB25 to DB25 connectors or DB25 to XLR female or XLR male. And of course the Pulse and the Fireface only take 1/4 inch balanced I/O on them. So I had to make, for example, and this is things you've got to consider. So for the Pulse, as an example, I had to make 4 brand new DB25, 8-channel DB25 snakes that ended on 1/4 inch balanced plugs. And so that took some time. DB25 cables are not that easy to make, let me tell you. Okay. But anyway, I got that all done and got that all wired up. So once I figured that out, so I posted that video and I got a lot of comments about it from various people saying, hey, Barry, why didn't you go with this or that? So let's talk about the this or that people recommended and why I chose not to go that route, and then some of the pros and the cons of each one of these units, okay? So let me pull out my phone, and I've got a couple of these pulled up here, and let's just take a look and see what we're looking at. So first of all, let's talk about the Pulse 16, right? So the Pulse 16, if you just need an ADAT alone, it has 16 analog I/O plus an additional 16 ADAT I/O on it, okay? And so that makes it very, very powerful, especially if you use it with MADI. If you use it with MADI, you can not only use the 16 I/O of the Pulse 16 with MADI, but you can also add an additional 16 channels via ADAT and also add an additional 16 channels of ADAT on the RME Fireface Plus, okay? So it just speaks to flexibility. Not that I'm going to need that much, but speaks to flexibility. So if you go with the ADAT version of it, it's $10.99. If you go with the MADI version, which I did, and it's $13.49. Now, for the record, you can buy the module that takes the 16 plus ADAT version and add MADI to it for about a couple $100. So you're not really saving anything by buying the MADI version now, maybe $50 or so, but that's about it, okay? And so that was the cost of that. So one of the ones I had it compared to a lot, especially was this one, and that is the Flock Patch LT 32 point patch bay. Now, one of the reasons why I ended up wiring all of my hardware into a patch bay. So I'm in and out of the patch bay, out of the Pulse 16 and the Fireface, as well as all my hardware unit. So those are all ins and out of patch bays. And one of the main reasons for that is if you use an RME Fireface or any RME device, as example, you have Total Mix that comes with it that gives you the ability to route things any way you want to outside of your DAW before it even hits your DAW. So as an example, right, if I want to record what I'm tracking, and let's say I want to add a compressor onto a vocalist, okay, and I want to plug that in, but maybe I want to stack maybe I want to add 1176 and maybe stack an LA2A on top of that. If I'm going in and out through the interface and I'm doing analog digital conversion, each one of those goes. But if I go directly into each one of those before it hits the AD and the DA, then I'm going to get the best quality, okay? And so that's what that gives me. It gives me the ability to be able to do that. Now, that is the selling point of the Flock Patch 32LT. What that does is enable you to connect up 16 IO and route that digitally, electronically within the application associated with that unit, but yet keep it all analog. So you're keeping everything in the analog domain. Now, that is primarily designed to replace a patch bay when you want to have that type of flexibility. What it does not have is the analog to digital conversion plus the additional expansion plus MADI. So that unit doesn't have that. So what that unit does, it solves the concern or issue of which I may be overthinking with as good as converters have got today. It may not be as applicable as it used to be back in the day when you really wanted to avoid multiple ins and outs of your analog to digital conversion and back in a digital analog conversion. But what that does is that solves the Flock unit, solves my need to be able to keep everything analog before it hits my digital conversion. It solves that problem. But it's also almost twice as expensive and doesn't give me any actual analog ins and outs, okay? All it's doing is it's just a digital version of patch bass that I already own. And if you know and understand patch bays and you know how to wire them properly, again, go back and watch my video, you'll learn that very rarely do I actually have to go in and patch things. It's only when I want to do a succession of things out there like that. So that comes up. So that's why I didn't go with the Flock Audio Patch 32, which I don't think is designed or even marketable to your average project studio user. What I think that's probably marketable to for sure is your professional environment where you've got a ton of hardware I/O and you want that flexibility to be able to do that, especially, and I don't know if you can do this network-based, but if you can do it network-based, that even makes it more compelling when various rooms are sharing the same gear. Although you still have to walk your butt up and go over and turn dials and set that analog, don't you? So I guess I'm going to set that one aside. Okay. All right. I moved on from that idea. Next up, people talked about, which is a very compelling unit. I have to tell you, I've been very attracted to this particular unit for a long time. And I think it's got a lot, and I mean a lot going for it. But there's reasons why it didn't solve my particular needs today. Now, it may solve a need later on, okay, but not today. So I do see the purchase of this in my future, and that is the Craneborne Audio 500 8at8, okay? And what that is an 8 slot 500 series rack that sells for $14.99, okay? Now what this does is you can use this just to be able to go in and out via ADAT. There's a version of it where you can use it as your recording interface. Okay, so it is all built into one. Also gives you ability to do analog summing, which is another very, very cool feature. There's a lot routed into this thing, and this thing is actually very, very, very compelling. So Barry, if it's so compelling, why didn't you go with that versus the Pulse 16? Well, this only will work with with 500 series units, of which I have 2 racks of 500 series units, okay? But it only works with them, okay? You can't use it for any other outboard analog I/O that you have. So that's one of the reasons, okay? And that's a big reason, quite frankly. Also, to truly utilize this the most, you don't really ever want to put mic preamps in this thing. If you've got 500 series mic preamps and you're putting them in this unit, I don't know what you're thinking. In my opinion, you shouldn't be, because that's an in and an out, not as an insert, right? It's not like you're sending it back out as an insert back into your mic pre. Well, some mic pre's you might, but for the most part, that's not a typical practice, okay? And so what you want to do is put your compressors, your EQs, all those type of things that you would typically use as an insert and patch in and patch out into your music, okay? And so when you have the ability to do that, that makes it really, really killer, okay? So then you're limited to that, of which I have enough 500 series units to fill this. However, some of them I don't need to go back in and out of constantly. Some of them, like for example, involved in my mastering chain, are always there. So I don't need to patch that. So unless you're heavily, heavily, heavily invested in 500 series units, I'm not seeing how this makes perfect sense for my situation, because I actually have as many pieces of 19-inch rack gear as I do 500 series gear, okay? So again, another compelling reason to go with the Pulse. It's just more compelling. Now, that said, I haven't tried the Craneborne stuff, but I've heard that the conversion of that is better than what's in the Pulse. The Pulse, I would say, so far from my experience, albeit limited, fairly, okay, is decent conversion. It is not on par with the RME Fireface. So that's another thing to consider in this when you're doing this. But so those are some of the reasons why I chose to go with the Pulse 16. Now, I've maxed out all 16 channels of the Pulse and all 8 channels of I/O of the RME. So I have 24 channels of hardware connected to these devices right now. So if I need to add any more, I'm either going to need to add another Pulse 16, or potentially that's when I'll choose to add the Craneborne unit and add the 8-channel slot of the 500 series units and really free that up to do what I need to do, okay? And so at some point I definitely will buy it. I do think it's compelling. I do want to check out the summing of it and see how well that works in that unit, okay? But I think that's very interesting. And then lastly, the other thing to consider would be the Motu 16A, of which can be used via just ADAT 16 I/O. It also can be used as a standalone interface, but it happens to be a AVB, okay? And so my RME is Matty, okay? So had it been Matty, I may have considered that one as well. There's a very good, strong possibility I would have, although the Pulse 16 feature-wise has a lot more going for it than the Motu unit. And the Motu unit is probably due for a refresh. It's been out for quite some time. I think it's still on Thunderbolt 2, as a matter of fact. So anyway, these are the things that I considered, and these are the things I think you should consider when you're looking at how to expand additional I/O. There's lots of options out there for expanding 8 additional mic preamps, okay? Tons and tons of options, anywhere from $200 to $300 up into $4,000 and $5,000 unit for eight channels of that, okay? There's plenty of them out there to choose from, and some great ones out there, okay? But that limits you to just microphones. As far as expanding I/O, there's only so many ways you're going to be able to do that and have it be cost effective, okay? I don't want to buy a whole brand new interface specifically just to be an interface when I don't need all those additional features. All I need is additional I/O on it, which is why the Ferrofish Pulse 16 fills a really good void in our world, okay? Only time will tell how much I love it. Later on, I will do a video on the setup of it, the use of it with my RME Fireface UFX Plus, as well as how I've integrated Matty and how I utilize that, as well as Total Mix. But that'll be a video probably another 3 or 4 months after I truly get synced and deeply ingrained in it, okay? But that was the logic behind my decision to make those choices, or make the particular purchase I made over one versus the other. So hopefully you find this interesting. If you do me a favor, hit that like button and then hit that subscribe button and then that notification bell so you know when I got a new video out. I appreciate you supporting the channel. I work really hard for you guys out there. I'm not bought and sold by any manufacturer or any music company in any way. I say what's on my mind and my mind only. No one ever influences what I say here on this channel. And I do that to make sure that you always get the real deal because there's enough crap out there on YouTube as it is. So until next time, hope every one of you have a great day. Bye-bye.